Good evening and welcome to the joint meeting of the Historical Commissions of Kendall County, Texas and Kendall County, Illinois. We are so glad you're here and we're excited about this program. I'm Vice Chair Catherine Adam Hurst, standing in for Chair Robin Stauber. This joint meeting was an idea of Chair Robin Stauber, and the reason being that we have talked on several occasions, well, many occasions, that when we are researching for Kendall County, we would click on the first link and then to discover that it wasn't Kendall County, Texas. And when the temperature says the high is going to be in the 20s, it makes us a little nervous. So Robin decided that perhaps we should learn more about Kendall County, Illinois. And so that's why we are here today. She can't be here today because she was selected to attend Tall Texans, which is a leadership training program sponsored by the Texas Library Association. Now, in the Texas library world, this is a huge honor. So congratulations, Robin, and we miss you today. So I would like to share a little bit of information about Kendall County, Texas with you. And so you'll see on the screen, you have the Kendall County map. Kendall County occupies 663 square miles on the edge of the Texas Hill Country in central Texas and is roughly 30 miles northwest of San Antonio on Interstate Highway 10. There is one city and several communities located in the county. Boerne, the county seat, is the only incorporated city and was platted in 1852 by John James and Gustav Tyson. The university-educated Germans who settled in Boerne named the city after Ludwig Boerne, a German Jewish political writer and satirist, whom they admired. The population today is about 15,000. The largest unincorporated community is Comfort, founded in 1854, and has a population of around 3,000. Smaller communities are Candalia, Waring, and Sisterdale, with populations varying from slightly under 100 to just over 400 persons. Sisterdale is the oldest community in the county. It was established as a Latin settlement in 1847. A Latin settlement was made up of German intellectuals who devoted themselves to German literature, philosophy, science, classical music, and the Latin language. Residents petitioned in 1859 to form a new county because of poor roads and the distance required to conduct county business. In 1862, the county was carved from Kerr and Blanco counties. It is the only county created in Texas during the Civil War and was named after George Wilkins Kendall, a prominent rancher and journalist. Bryden will tell you more about him in a few minutes. Although Kendall County was created while under the control of the Confederate government, Union sympathies ran high. A tragic event occurred in August 1862 when men with Union sympathies, mainly from the Comfort area, decided to leave the county and head to Mexico, with the ultimate destination being New Orleans, where they planned to enlist in the Union Army. The men made it as far as Kinney County, where Confederate forces killed 34 and others were captured and executed. In 1866, Comfort families erected a monument in their memory named True der Union, or Loyalty to the Union. It is located on High Street in Comfort. The county still feels the German influence through names of places, surnames, and festivals held throughout the year. The Boerne Village Band, formed in 1860, recently celebrated its 160th anniversary and is the oldest continuous performing German band in existence outside of Germany. Due to our proximity and the ease of commuting to San Antonio, farms and ranches are giving away to subdivisions. 2021 statistics list the population of the county as 51,087, a growth of over 52% since 2010. So that's a little bit about our county. And now I would like to introduce Bryden Moon. He will be telling us about George Wilkins Kendall. And Bryden is a local historian and the Historic Marker Chair for the Kendall County Historical Commission. Are you ready, Brian?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
So, good evening. Sorry. Okay. Since I'm distilling an original 45-minute presentation into approximately 20 minutes this evening, I'm going to keep my nose to the script. Interesting name for my county, George Wilk Kendall. Rare the county that is named for a living incumbent resident. But what is even rarer was George Wilkin Kendall's path to fame. He was not from a founding family of Texas. He was not a politician, a Texas Ranger, a lawyer, nor a war hero. His career enterprise was located in Louisiana. New Hampshire was his birth state. Yet George Wilkins Kendall had unique talents and an incredible life. He was a man who dreamed and then lived his dreams. When casting about for a new county name tonight, you will learn how George Wilkins Kendall's name would have been placed at the top of any short list. George Wilkins Kendall was bright, well-written, adventurous, driven, curious, and creative with a great sense of humor. So how does a man from the Northeast with his lifelong business headquartered in the South wind up having a newly formed Texas county named after him? Well, let's roll back the clock to 1809. George Wilkins Kendall was born on August 22nd, 1809 in Mount Vernon, New Hampshire, the first of 5 children of Thaddeus and Abigail Wilkins Kendall. Times were hard and Thaddeus moved his family from one settlement to another. At the age of 7, George visited his grandfather and wound up living with him. Deacon Samuel Wilkins, George's maternal grandfather, was also the source of George's given middle name. Here George learned to read, and when it was a topic that interested him, he would devour it. Geography was his favorite subject. He looked at dog-eared books and well-worn maps and dreamed. He longed to visit far-flung places. Young Kendall wanted to travel and desired to live a life of action and adventure. He remained under his grandfather's roof for 10 years. I believe Deacon Wilkins had an extremely positive influence. Every Kendall signature always included his middle name, Wilkins. At 15, he announced to his family that he wanted to be a printer. And at age 16, he's in Boston, Massachusetts, living with his uncle and working as a printer's apprentice. At 17, George Wilkins Kendall is off on his road of adventure. Traveling on his own, he goes to New York, but has trouble finding a job. So he explores the Midwest and the Southeast. By his 26th birthday in 1835, George had been in at least 14 states and the territory of Wisconsin. In 1835, there were only 24 states. After arriving in New Orleans, Louisiana, he co-founds a newspaper called the Picayune. Now, the Picayune was the name of a coin that was an old Spanish coin that was worth about 6 1/4 cents, and that's what the newspaper cost. At this time, there were no phones, there wasn't even any newswire or telegraph, so newspapers were a very important method of communicating. New Orleans was a bustling port town of 80,000. Much of the news that flowed south with the Mississippi came on incoming boats. So in a classic Kendall move, in order to out-hustle the competing newspapers, he would take a small printing press and board a boat that was going north on the Mississippi. Getting off at either Memphis, Natchez, or Baton Rouge, he would catch that boat that was headed back to New Orleans. Then while returning home, Kendall would interview folks and use the small press to print up the news. Upon reaching New Orleans, he would walk up the ship with the printed news and beat the competition. Kendall was involved with the Picayune newspaper the rest of his life. This newspaper is still printed today, 184 years after its founding. This portrait of Kendall is estimated to be painted during his early years in New Orleans. We'll move forward from his initial years spent learning the publishing business and the founding of the Picayune to the 1841 Santa Fe expedition. The Texan Santa Fe expedition, a political, military, commercial venture, was occasioned by the Republic of Texas's President Lamar's desire to divert to Texas at least part of the trade that was carried over the Santa Fe Trail. Texas needed trade, and the Santa Fe market apparently offered the best opportunities. Kendall had always wanted to take a journey of exploration, and the Republic of Texas was happy to have him. Who better than the editor of the New Orleans Picayune to chronicle this adventure to and through the outer edges of civilization into the West? Pre-expedition in Austin, Kendall was informed that they would not leave for 10 days. And during this window of time, Kendall experienced two significant events. First, he joined a prearranged side trip to San Antonio. This was Kendall's first trip to San Antonio, but it was not the city that captured his imagination. It was on this side trip that he discovered the hill country. He was impressed with the clear, cool streams, the wide valleys, and the drier climate and gentle breezes. For Kendall, this was the ideal landscape, and as we will learn, he never forgot the natural beauty of the hill country. The second significant event, after returning to Austin with time to spare, Kendall decided to take a swim one evening in the Colorado River, but it was pitch black out, and he missed his normal path and fell many feet over a cliff onto a boulder, and he shattered his ankle. He worried that he would not be able to go on the expedition because he could not walk, but President Lamar visited his bedside, and shortly after, Kendall received confirmation that a special wagon would be provided to carry him. The Republic of Texas launched the expedition on June 19, 1841. Traders with wagon loads of merchandise, accompanied by a military escort as protection against the Indians, would cross the plains to exchange their goods for bullion and furs. There were 24 wagons in all, over 300 participants, including many soldiers. The goal was to travel through the wilds of Texas to the capital of New Mexico, Santa Fe, but there was no road, there was no designated route to guide them through this unknown and uncharted expanse. And they did not know it at the time, but they had miscalculated several things, including underestimating the distance they would travel by nearly half. 3 weeks into the trip, they labored through quicksand and narrowly avoided a prairie fire. 1 month in the expedition, it was decided to burn their tents just to lighten their loads. 6 weeks into the journey, Kendall was finally able to ride a horse. The expedition's morale was low, and they were disorganized and spread out over the prairie, still trying to get to Santa Fe. And as they will eventually learn, they were still 6 weeks away. This adventure of a lifetime turned out to be a dangerous trip, as all suffered hunger and thirst. There was loss of lives and Indian attacks. Excerpts from Fayette Copeland's Kendall the Picayune. By August, the weakness of slow starvation slackened the pace of the expedition. The men became inured to camping without clear water, to eating half-cooked meat without salt. None of the rumors was as bad as the reality. Game was scarce. They had no water. Finally, after 3 months of traveling, when Kendall's expedition party arrived into New Mexico on September 16th, they were not greeted but arrested. The Texans had expected to be welcomed by the citizens of New Mexico and certainly had not anticipated armed resistance. But the governor of New Mexico had learned of the expedition and had detachments outwaiting the arrival of the Texans. Most of the party had survived the journey to New Mexico, but now they were in prison. On October 17th, a forced march to Mexico began. It was 2,000 miles and on foot. During one stretch, they traveled 40 miles straight, but that was not as bad as a few days later. They had to travel 40 hours straight without any food or water. From Fayette Copeland's book on Kendall, from dawn until dusk, the Texans were driven until they scarcely had energy enough to eat their scanty rations. It was a nightmare they never forgot. They averaged approximately 29 miles a day. After Christmas, outside of Mexico City, Kendall's parties stopped marching and all were placed in jail. They had traveled 2,000 miles in a little over 2 months. Kendall remained jailed until influential friends secured his release on May 1842, after spending 7 months in captivity. On his return to New Orleans, he ran a serial account of the expedition in the Picayune. In 1844, he published the narrative of the Texan Santa Fe expedition, a 900-page, 2-volume book. It's said to have sold 40,000 copies in 8 years. There were just a few illustrations. This action scene includes Kendall's special wagon. 2 years later, Kendall was back in the limelight. Between 1846 and 1848, Mexico and the United States waged war over Texas and Mexican lands of Western North America. This turn of events once again put Kendall in the spotlight as he headed to the Texas-Mexican border to cover the unfolding war for the Picayune. He entered Mexico with the U.S. Army to see firsthand what was going on, and due to his knack for writing and his persistence in getting the details to the presses first, Kendall became known as the first modern war correspondent and the most widely read known reporter in America in his day. Kendall rode with the U.S. generals and soldiers and was an eyewitness to the key battles of the Mexican War. He watched the dueling cannons of war. Kendall would write about the day's events. This is an actual dispatch that was dated September 8th, 1847. At port, in advance of these battles, he set up routes to the ports. The writers would then rush his letters, notes, and dispatches regarding the active battles to the boats on the Mexican coast, and then ship them to the Picayune office in New Orleans, and again, meet the competing newspapers with the latest news on the war. There was a lot of interest about the war in Texas and elsewhere. And due to this, George Wook and Kendall's stories would make it onto the pages of many major newspapers, not just the Picayune. There's an actual Picayune supplement on the Battle of Monterey. The war ended in 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Mexico recognized the Rio Grande as the border of Texas and signed over all of California, Utah, Nevada, as well as parts of New Mexico, Arizona, Wyoming, and Colorado. After the Mexican War, Kendall took a boat to Europe for what was meant to be a short vacation and to write a book on the Mexican War. He postponed writing the book after getting over there to cover the unfolding events in Europe. There was unrest. In 1848, many countries were undergoing revolts with rulers and monarchies. In France, Kendall met his future wife, Adeline, and they married in 1849. He wound up staying in Europe for 2 years. His first child, Georgina, was born in 1850. In 1850, Kendall returned to the United States to work on publishing and promoting his book, The War Between the United States and Mexico, Illustrated. Here's a promotional flyer. And depending on the binding, prices range from $36 to $48. Now, while the cover was not impressive, to illustrate the book, he engaged the talents of German-born artist Karl Nabels, who was living in Mexico at the time. Given how labor-intensive it was to produce the book, it's easy to see why Kendall published only 500 copies in 1851. He traveled back and forth between the US and Europe, still writing articles for the Picayune, both in Europe and in the US. It was during this window of time that Kendall focused on securing lands for his next enterprise, raising sheep in the beautiful hill country land that had enchanted him 11 years earlier. In late 1852, while visiting, he describes New Braunfels to his wife as a great German settlement, and later, flushed with pride about finding his ideal home site, he writes about a pleasant and verdant valley surrounded by sides by a rough, rocky, and rugged mountains with rich grass and a beautiful stream located about 6 miles northwest of New Braunfels. Kendall starts getting things ready for the ranching operations outside of New Braunfels. After securing his land, he bought several merino sheep while in Europe and had them shipped to Texas. He rolled up his sleeves, working hard, building pens, plowing fields, growing corn. These 4 tracts, totaling 1,380 acres, constitute the bulk of Kendall's operations outside of New Braunfels. An interesting visit occurred in 1854. Frederick Law Olmsted writes that we had the pleasure of spending an evening in New Braunfels with G.W. Kendall of the New Orleans Picayune. Olmsted has a trip planned to Mexico and seeks counsel. Kendall was not very encouraging per Olmsted. We found no particular encouragement toward entering Mexico. We should find the scenery consisting of desert plains and cactus and be robbed each day of something we had. Certain circumstances in his first visit to Mexico we thought might have given him a permanently unfavorable impression. In 1844, we learned that Kendall has also started a satellite ranch on a 4,000 plus acre Ortiz survey, located just a few miles east of Bernie. Kendall called it Post Oak Spring Ranch. Much larger than his New Braunfels operation, he now dreamed that this would be the future site of a great ranching enterprise. However, one reason for not building there immediately was fear of Indians. Kendall made many trips to Post Oak Spring Ranch, always alert for any signs of Indian. Today, I'm not certain that my shepherds have not been killed and scalps and my flock scattered. Within a month, the last month or two, the Indians have been on every side of me. My great good fortune has so far been that the rascals do not seem to have contracted a taste for mutton. Kendall was constantly bombarded with letters about Texas, all facets, and it said he took the time to answer each, despite the fact that at this time he had 2 ranches, 4 large flocks of sheep, a gristmill, and a stock of horses and cattle to look over, and a newspaper to write for. To deal with these demands, in 1858, he sat down and poured all his enthusiasm for Texas into a 3,600-word letter and sent it off to the Picayune to be printed into circulars. When this bundle of these circulars came from New Orleans, the task of letter writing was simpler. He either mailed a copy to each distant inquirer or sent one along with a hasty note. The status of his 1856, 1857, and 1858 sheep ranching success is published in the 1859 Texas Almanac under the header G.W. Kendall, Sheep Raising in Texas. In 2 years, his flocks have more than doubled. About this time, due to his storied reputation, his promotion of Texas and the hill country, and his continued highly successful sheep ranching enterprise, Kendall is touted as a candidate for governor. In 1859, several newspapers and the German residents of both Bernie and New Braunfels launched a campaign to elect him governor. Now, Kendall is generally not interested and writes to the San Antonio Herald, "I have no taste for the calling of a politician, have never been in the business, and I'm too old to learn a new trade." Kendall is available for the December 1859 petition to form a new county that Catherine mentioned. And as is usual, his signature tops off the list of petitioners. By 1858, Kendall has moved his entire family from France to his ranch outside of New Braunfels. And then in February 1861, he and his family take up residence at Post Oak Spring Ranch. Kendall's family has grown, 2 girls and 2 boys. Less than 1 year after their move, Kendall County is created on January the 10th, 1862. 1 week later, Kendall's Native American fears become a personal reality. While Kendall is in the hills to inspect one of the new sheep camps, the wife of one of the shepherds came running to the Kendall ranch house to say that 4 Indians had chased the head shepherd into the shepherd's house. There were 3 flocks out with Shepherds Schlossler, Fletchler, and Baptiste. Kendall came home after nightfall to this scene of excitement and confusion. and when it was to look for the missing shepherds. Two of the flocks came straggling in without dog or shepherd, but the third flock could not be found. As neighbors helped join in the search the next day, the sound of barking dogs led them to the naked body of the young German boy, John Fletcher. He was pierced with 17 arrows and resting against a tree. They followed the trail of Indians down to a rough crossing of a rocky ravine, and there, partially in the water, lay the body of the Mexican shepherd Baptiste, 4 arrows in his back. Kendall fires off a letter to the editor of the San Antonio Herald, an excerpt from his article titled Frontier Protection. But while the blood of the unfortunate shepherds is still moist upon the ground, there are many who at least hope that when the provisions of the new Frontier Protection Bill are carried out, we will have security, but this I doubt. The first Kendall County tax records show that Kendall has amassed 6,000 acres in the new county worth over $42,000. Now, earlier I mentioned that when casting about for a new county name, it's easy to see George Wilkins Kendall's name would have been placed at the top of a short list. As Kendall was so well respected that his name would have been placed at the top of any list, and that's literally what you find when going through the Kendall County Commissioner Court minutes. Kendall is a participating member of his new county, and the Kendall County Commissioners put him to work as he was selected as a grand juror on May 18, 1863, as well as one of a 3-member board of school examiners. Please note that regardless of the length of the list or the alphabetic patterns, Mr. Kendall's name is always listed at the top. George Wilkins Kendall rolled up his sleeves during his time in Kendall County, experiencing the ups and downs of working the lands through droughts, floods, locusts, wolf attacks, Native American attacks, loss of animals, loss of people, loss of lives, through northers and intense heats. He quietly died at his ranch of congestive chills on October 25th, 1867, at the age of 58. Longtime Picayune business associate A.M. Holbrook places Kendall's obituary in the regional newspapers. Kendall is buried in the Burney Cemetery. His is the only Burney grave site with a Texas Historical Commission marker. Although inaccessible and on private property today, in 1936, Texas's centennial year, the year that the first historical markers were installed in Texas, Kendall's Post Oak Spring Ranch was given a marker. Conclusion, with all his accomplishments, George Wilkins Kendall was certainly worthy of his own book, Kendall of the Picayune, which Fayette Copeland wrote 78 years ago. First published in 1843, it is still the standard on Kendall and served as a major source for some of the background material for this presentation. Thank you. Done.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, Biden needs to quit sharing.
Okay, now it's time for Kendall County, Illinois. Thank you. Thank you, Bryden.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, hello there. Let's see. Let me go to my sharing screen here if I could. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you, Bryden. And also a special thank you to Robin for getting this started in the first place. My name is Johanna Byram. I'm a director here at the Kendall County Historical Society in Kendall County, Illinois. I'm going to go ahead and move my screen here to the slideshow. Here we go. Okay. I'm on here to talk about Amos Kendall. Amos Kendall was born in Dunstable, Massachusetts on August 16th, 1789. So he's probably about, 30 years before your Kendall. He was the 6th of 12 children of Zebedee and Molly Kendall. His father was a farmer. They had sheep as well as cattle and other crops, and he was very well respected in their county. He wanted Amos to farm because he thought he was a sickly boy who had a lot of medical problems. He wanted to strengthen up, but Amos insisted upon going to school. He attended the New Ipswich Academy in New Hampshire, as well as the Lawrence Academy in Groton, Massachusetts, both of which were free public schools. But his father made him earn the money to travel to the schools and for meals and whatnot. After graduating from the public schools, he also worked as a teacher before he started at Dartmouth to earn the money for Dartmouth. He graduated at the top of his class at Dartmouth. However, he was not liked very much at Dartmouth because the fellow students all blamed him for banning alcohol on the campus. After Dartmouth, he studied law and served as a legal apprentice. He was unhappy with the practice of law and wanted to go back to being a teacher. So in 1814, he took the position of tutor for the children of Henry Clay, and that was in Kentucky. And here is a photo of Henry Clay. Henry Clay was the Secretary of State under Abraham Lincoln. Okay, his life in Kentucky in 1816 to 1826, he resided in Frankfort, Kentucky. He married a woman named Mary Wolford in 1818, and they had 4 children. Mary died, unfortunately, in 1823, and he remarried in 1826 to Jane Kyle, and Jane Kyle gave him 11 more children, so altogether 15 children. Amos Kendall was the founding editor of the Argus of the Western. I can't even see that. Yeah, I'm going to have to move your thing. Okay, sorry, I'm going to go back again here. Yeah, Argus, the thing. Can I go back one on this? Sorry. Oh. So he was Argus of the Western Front. The newspaper that he became involved with, he became more and more populist as he went along, and he kind of veered from the politics of Henry Clay, and he founded some populist movements there in Kentucky, which attracted the attention of Andrew Jackson. So when Andrew Jackson became the president in, I think, 1828, he moved to Washington, D.C. in 1829, and he was appointed the 4th auditor of the Treasury. He was really disgusted with the waste and corruption in Washington, D.C., so he fired most of the federal workers that were left over from John Quincy Adams' administration. He also, while he worked in Washington, D.C., he also was very disgusted that so many of the bureaucrats in Washington, they tended to try to emulate the British. They wore British clothing. They bought all their fabric from Britain. They hosted dinner parties with British food. He thought we should be more American. And he was one of the first proponents of Buy American. He also chose to live not in the lavish homes near the Capitol. He chose to live in what then was the working class neighborhood of Georgetown. Of course, today, Georgetown is now the Tawny neighborhood in DC. As Jackson gained more and more responsibility, Amos Kendall gained more and more responsibility within the Jackson administration, and he became a trusted advisor in Jackson's kitchen cabinet. Andrew Jackson called him his man of all works, which is a job today we would know as chief of staff. Kendall is also believed to have been the author of Jackson's veto to recharter the Second Bank of the United States. Okay. He served as the Postmaster General from 1834 to 1840. He, when he encountered the when he got into the post office, he discovered that there was an awful lot of corruption going there as well. And many postal contractors had very sweet deals with his predecessor. He basically canceled all those contracts, and he basically made a lot of enemies at this time. And at that time, he was accused of manipulating the Postal Service to deliver only mail to the pro-Jackson newspapers from the West and not deliver the Eastern papers as fast. Also, in the South, a lot of the Postal Service in the South would not deliver abolitionist materials. And he warned them that you know, this was illegal to do, but he was accused of promoting them later on. John C. Quincy Adams said that Jackson basically, Jackson and Van Buren were basically under his spell, and Amos Kendall was ruling him. In fact, a lot of what the research we found said that Amos Kendall was probably one of the most powerful men in America that was never elected. He ended up, after he left the post office for citing poor health, he ended up with a lot of legal, financial, as well as health problems. He was sued by numerous postal contractors for illegally manipulating operations of the post office. And there were two cases that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Kendall versus the United States, which he lost, and Kendall versus Stokes, which he won. Kendall versus Stokes was the more serious case. It was the one about claiming that he abused his powers and manipulated the Postal Service. And so he was cleared of that. But by losing the second case, or the Kendall versus the United States, he ended up very much in debt. And so practically without money, he took what little money he had left and he founded two newspapers, both of which ended up failing. The longest running of the two was called the Kendall Exposition. He then returned to the practice of law after the newspapers failed. And the most notable case he did, he represented the Western Cherokee Nation against the United States. The Cherokees then won the right to control their own lands because of that case. Now, basically, he is still rather without money, but fortunately, he made an acquaintance with Samuel Morse, the inventor of the telegraph. In 1845, he became their business manager for Samuel Morse. He received a 10% commission on the sale of each patent license for the newly invented telegraph. And he used a lot of his connections to recruit investors to build the infrastructure that was needed to connect the telegraph from Washington, D.C. to New York, and then later New York to Boston. He incorporated the Magnetic Telegraph Company, which raised funds to connect the major cities all east of the Mississippi. The Magnetic Telegraph Company was then sold to the American Telegraph Company, making Amos Kendall a very wealthy man. And of course, all those, the American Telegraph Company eventually became AT&T that we know today. And so he ended up with a lot of shares of this company, and they've split and split and split down the years. He ended up donating these shares to a lot of charitable causes. And so there are a lot of scholarships still to this day out there. In fact, the student who graduates from a public school in Washington, D.C. with the highest test scores ends up with a full ride scholarship through school all 4 years. And it's paid for the endowment, paid for the stock that he owned in this company. And then he reinvented himself one more time. And in 1847, Amos Kendall assisted a man named Platt Skinner to raise funds to establish a school for the deaf. Mr. Skinner was found to, as here says, abusing the kids. Basically what he did was all the funds that were raised, he spent the money himself. He didn't spend it on the children. And Kendall was very upset with that. Excuse me. He took him to court, and Mr. Skinner ended up just leaving, abandoning the school. And 5 of the kids there were orphans. And so Amos Kendall ended up with 5 more children, becoming the ward of these children. So altogether, with his 15 children, he got 5 more. He donated his home and 2 acres of land to establish the Columbia School for the Deaf, Dumb, and Blind. He ended up hiring Edward Miller Gallaudet to run the school. Gallaudet expanded this elementary education onto college education. And Kendall really wanted to keep the school a free school for elementary education. And so because of his large endowments, he was able to run the Kendall School for the Deaf, elementary education. But today it is now known as Gallaudet University. And if you see this lovely brick building with the stripes on it here, that was actually Kendall's home that ended up being donated to the university there. Now, you might ask, why in the world was a man who never set foot in Kendall County, Illinois, or in the state of Illinois at all, why do we have a county named after him? Well, prior to 1841, Kendall County was really a part of LaSalle and Kane counties. Much like your county, we were carved out of other counties. So because both counties found it really difficult to basically govern people, they considered them to take the law into their own hands. They didn't like paying taxes and they didn't like voting. But back then you had to travel all the way to the county seat to vote, so it was quite a distance to do so. So at the 12th Assembly of Illinois legislature, a bill was introduced to create the new county on January 4th of 1841. Now, originally the county was supposed to be named Orange County in honor of all the soldiers who most of them came from Orange County, New York, and they came out earlier in the 1820s and they fought in the Black Hawk Wars. But on the second reading of the bill, a representative from Grundy County was it that proposed a new bill, the county be named after Amos Kendall, and that bill was passed. And there are also towns of Kendall, New York, and Kendallville, Indiana, which are named after Amos Kendall. I'm at this point going to hand over our program to Lisa. And Lisa, I think we have a slide that only didn't have all of them on there. This was the early one I gave you because I noticed there was problems with that. So
Okay. So we need to take a break for a minute while we get the right PowerPoint up. Excuse us.
I'm sorry about that. Oh, the first draft.
Okay, so
You want to share that?
where's the share?
Okay, just leave it and go back into the Zoom meeting. Okay,
Hi, guys.
and then we go to share screen and can find it there.
Okay. Okay. Why is it not? There we go. Can you see it? Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, we can see it.
Hi there. I'm Lisa. I am also a director with Kendall County Historical Society. And before I go into Kendall County itself, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our Historical Society. We are actually celebrating our 50th year this year. It began in a town called Plano, Illinois in 1970, where no one's counting 2020. So it's actually 51, but forget that. And then in 1974, 1984, we were gifted Lyon Farm, which is 38 plus acres here by the Lyon family. And they had cattle on the farm here, also race horses and a number of other things. And we were very grateful to the Lyon family for gifting this beautiful farm to us. We're actually the largest historical society in the state of Illinois. So onward with the rest of the presentation. So that's my welcome, and we do the, how do we advance the screen here? This one? Okay, here I am. Okay, so Kendall County at a glance, we had a population, we just got our census in for 2020, we had a population of 131,000 and change. The county seat is in Yorkville. We are on unincorporated Yorkville where we're at. The most populous municipality is Oswego, which is just to our east of where we are right now. I threw in this little climate average because I know you folks are down there where it's nice and warm this time of year. This was off of our Kendall County website, but I think it's a little bit off. We can go to -12 in January and up to 84 high in July. But anyone that could tell you that's been here for any length of time, those numbers are way off. There were a couple of years ago, it hit on -25 in January, and we've had a summer of over 100 degrees for probably a month straight this last year. So Kendall County, with Kendall County cities, we have several that are just part in our county and part in other counties. Aurora is the second largest city in the state of Illinois, and their southern part is part of Kendall County. Joliet is the fourth largest city in Illinois, and its northwest corner is in Kendall County. So the only city that is totally in Kendall itself is the city of Plano. Plano, we'll go on and talk about them as I go through the townships. We also have several villages here: Lisbon, Millbrook, Millington, parts of other towns, Plainfield, and Montgomery. We are located, if you see right here on the picture here, we're located in the northeast portion of Illinois, and there's a small map on the center. I don't know how much you can see there of the county itself and the 9 townships, and each one in the county is an 18 square mile. There are 9 townships, with one being slightly smaller, and that would be Bristol Township because its border is the Fox River. So go on to our townships. We have Big Grove Township. Big Grove Township, I love that name. It was actually by a description. We just helped author a book that will be out soon. We were contacted by an author in California that went into an antique store, and she found what looked like a nice looking older book. And it was a description of traveling through Illinois and westward in 1832. And in it, they went through Big Grove Township. And in Big Grove Township, they described it as having large black walnut trees and how beautiful the full trees were. But that every time I see Big Grove, that's what I think about, the big walnut trees. And there still are a lot of big walnut trees in the area. Okay, and then we go to Bristol Township. Bristol Township is located in the northwest of our county. It has a population of a little over 26,000. Half of the city of Yorkville is in Bristol Township, but there are other towns in Montgomery also, and parts of Aurora that I was talking about earlier, and also an unincorporated community of Bristol, Illinois. The largest employer is the water park here that you see, Raging Waves. It is also the largest water park in Illinois. Why it's out here, we're not really sure. There's a long story on that one. But okay, and then it brings up to Fox Township. Fox Township is in the southwest corner of our county. and it has about 1,600 people in it by the 2010 census. The 2020 wasn't available yet. And what you're seeing in the photograph here was a 1919 schoolhouse that was built and used until 1971, is now serving as the town hall and their historical museum. And that brings us on to Kendall Township with the beautiful restored old Kendall County Courthouse. It is the county seat in Kendall Township, 8,500 people by the 2020 census. That is in the Kendall Township, but it is also the city of Yorkville where it is located, and Yorkville, as I mentioned earlier, is part Bristol and part Kendall Township. So actually the population of Yorkville is a little over 20,000 people. So it's a fairly good sized town. Well, we had, Yorkville was the early industrial center for the county. And they had everything from ice houses to dairy farms, to blacksmith shops, and a button factory where they would actually go out into the Fox River and catch clams. And they would take the clams and remove the clam, take the shell over to the button factory and press buttons. We have some on display here at the museum. I should have put them on the slide. Okay, and that takes us to Lisbon Township. Lisbon Township was named after Lisbon, Portugal. An early settler, John Moore, named it because it was different than what they had previously. Now their population is just a small but mighty little 899 people. It's very quaint. It's a beautiful little town. It was more bustling at first. But then the train was promised to come out that way and the train never did. So it contains the village of Lisbon itself and unincorporated villages of Platteville and Helmore, which is some cute anecdote on Helmore. It's just a few buildings and a church. And every year the people that used to live in Helmore come back and they have Helmore Fest. And it's really kind of cute. See, that's Lisbon. Here we go. Little Rock Township. Little Rock Township is in Plano, Illinois, and it's named for Little Rock Creek. It is home to the city of Plano and parts of Sandwich, Illinois also. But Plano was also depicted in the Superman movies that were done out here within the last 10 years. I believe there were 2 of them. And they renamed the town Smallville for that. And they actually were setting up movie displays, and there was a fake gas station. It was really, it was pretty interesting to see these movie sets going up. But yeah, the Man of Steel was the name of the movie, one of them, and I think there was a follow-up to that. But that was real interesting. At that point in time, I was working in a cosmetics industry, and we kept having makeup artists running in and out all the time, looking for different things. All right, and I'm sorry. The Plano Reaper was also developed in Plano. And it was manufactured in Plano and eventually became International Harvester. Nahase Township, and boy, I'm glad I got that name right. It's a population of 8,100 people as of 2010. I'm sorry. It contains part of the village of Plainfield. It has an interesting history to it. It was named by Native Americans after was one of their tribal elders, I believe. Yeah. So that's the only one in Kendall County that has an actual Indian name to it. So let's see, where are we at now? And we are in Oswego Township. That is our largest town in the area. Oswego has a population of 50,000 people. It is not entirely in Kendall County, so we can't completely own it, but it is home also to the largest subdivision in the United States, which is Boulder Hills subdivision. it was built up when Caterpillar and Western Electric plants were here in this area. They've since moved. I think they're down by you guys now. So, so but they did well for us. I hope they do well down there too. Okay, and then there's Seward Township. It was named after William H. Seward, who was the Secretary of State under Lincoln. It contains parts of Joliet, but major industry in that area is agriculture. It's primarily farms. But that's what's beautiful about Illinois, all the waving grain and corn. Okay, so I just wanted to go on to some fun facts because everything gets boring after a while. We have a couple of Guinness Book of World Records here in Kendall County. We have the smallest railroad in the United States. It was a one-man railroad. It went 1.9 miles and it went from Newark, Illinois to Millington, Illinois. It had a very small engine. It was way too small for the train, but they got it to work. And there's some great videos out there if you want to check them out on YouTube of the Midland Railroad. And the other one was set more recently in 2011. The middle school students here in Yorkville held the largest square dance. There 800 students took part in the square dance in 2011. And some more fun facts about Kendall County. We actually have 10 buildings on the National Register of Historic Places. The Chapel on the Green, the Farnsworth House, the Plano train station. I'm going down. Okay, and the Reformed Church of Latter-day Saints, I wanted to touch base on that one. It's called the Stone Church, and what that was is, I don't know how much Mormon history you know, but the Mormons first came to Illinois and settled in a place they named Nauvoo. When Joseph Smith II, the leader of the Mormon Church, was killed at Nauvoo, the Mormons split up and they headed to Utah. And when their journey started to happen and the reading of the will, Joseph Smith III thought his father was going to leave him his ministry, but he didn't. He left it in the care of Brigham Young. Joseph Smith III then came up to Plano, Illinois, and there is still to this day a large Mormon congregation in the Plano area. The next is the Albert Sears home, which you'll find over to your left, and then the Plano Hotel is also on the National Registry. And then we have the Lewis Seward House, the old Kendall County Courthouse, which our own Johanna put on the National Registry. We have the Yorkville High School, which is now the Parkview Academy. That'll be in your lower right. And then not pictured is the Evelyn site. It is actually an archaeological dig. It's for American Indian burial ground that's being worked on and uncovered for the last 10 years. And it is near Lisbon, Illinois. We have our 11th building about to become part of the National Registry. And that you'll see in the next slide. And this one is near and dear to my heart because Johanna and myself both worked on it. It's a fun fact I discovered on the county, both counties, Kendall, Illinois and Kendall, Texas, saved their old historic jails that were built by the Pauley Jail Company, both of them within 10 years of them, and both had a sheriff's residence and a jailhouse inside the same building. They're all both saved by volunteers. So that says a lot for your county and for ours, that we value our past to know where we're going. So that would conclude what I have to say about Kendall County. I hope I wasn't too boring. Is there any questions? Or are there any questions? I know how to speak English. So how do you
Questions?
unmute?
We don't have any questions. That was just really wonderful. Wonderful. We learned a lot.
We did too.
And you have such
You
a
wanna try
rich
Kendall?
history.
I was just really impressed with the your description of the temperature and the humidity. of the hill country, and I was very jealous because we hit a high of 34 today.
Oh, no. I think ours was 77.
Yeah, see?
That's why we're always so in shock when we're looking at the weather and we realize we've looked at the wrong state.
So I'm wondering,
Well,
I've
this-
heard there's 4 Kendalls out there, and I'm wondering who they're named after.
Right.
No.
Right.
Well, this was fun, and you are putting this up on YouTube.
Yes, I think that's what was Robin's plan to do, was to put it on YouTube.
Wonderful,
And so when she
wonderful.
comes back, it'll probably be next week before we really hear anything, because we recorded it to the cloud and then she's the one that's going to go through the steps to put it where it needs to go. She's in Dallas all week, so we won't hear from her until Saturday probably. So,
And you'll be sending us a copy.
yes, yes, we will. Yes, we will.
I don't think I can watch it, but
No, I know what you mean. Oh, we have a
under every
question.
and All right, well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest
Okay,
of
we-
your evening.
we have
It
a
was nice to
question.
meet everyone.
Yes, we have a question.
Sure.
The farm that was given to you, what
Mhm.
are you doing with it as the historical commission? Are you farming it or?
Very good question.
Uh-huh.
Actually, there was a lot of development as this county grew. We were the largest growing county in the United States in 2010. A lot of the
Wow.
buildings that were here, can you hear me? No?
Yes, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw you
We
shaking
can
your
hear
head.
you.
We have several historic buildings that were in danger of being lost due to development, and they were brought out here and restored and put on the property. We also have an agricultural museum, and we also have the museum that we're sitting in here now with the history, which covers just about everything, but it's moving, it's
Oh.
always moving. But every
Yes.
single building is its museum unto itself. It's a beautiful place to spend the day. We have butterfly gardens out here.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, and actually,
18 acres of the land was restored to original prairie,
mhm.
and it's used
Oh,
by, it's part of the state extension offices. They study it because
Mhm.
that's one of the few natural prairies back again.
I would
That
like you
is
to meet
amazing.
someone if he'll talk to you. We have one of our oldest board members here, and he could tell you about the
Okay.
farm.
well, I'm ready for a road trip.
Oh, you.
I think we
That's
basically,
right.
we have 9 historic buildings that were transferred here. And we just
That is
recently,
amazing.
an 1847 one-room schoolhouse, we just had completely restored. And it's perfectly beautifully intact, yeah.
That is
And
wonderful.
Mr. Jack Jenkins.
Hello,
He
how are
is
you?
Actually, our farm chairman, and he could tell you everything about when these buildings were put here and how the Historical Society came to get the farm.
Yes, how did you do it?
Back in 1970, the area decided they wanted a historical society, so they started in Plano, working at the bank, and then the library, and then 1974, I think it was, we had a woman that donated the historical society 40 acres with the older buildings, and it's all farmable, and about another 150 of it went to the forest preserve. And in that process, we moved in a lot of buildings like the Plano Depot that was made in Chicago in 3 sections and brought out and to Plano, and then it was brought back here and all in one piece. So we got the original Plano Depot, and then we got an old country store that was, there was another wealthy gal, Mrs. Dunbar. She donated $80,000 to help move in a lot of these buildings.
How wonderful.
Back in a few years ago, they decided that we were the largest historical society in Illinois, non-for-profit. It was all volunteers now.
Yes.
Back in my time, I've been here 35 years, but we did a lot of farming out here with small grain and stuff, and we got a big steam engine that was donated to us, a case. And so we had people that kind of grew up with it. I did, and we had several guys. And now this new generations doesn't turn their crank, so
Yeah.
we kind of rent that part out. But that was one of the things that made us stand out in Illinois for this historical
Yes.
society. This is all done with volunteers. Nobody gets paid. And,
Right.
and if we want something, we go out, friends we know and stuff, and ask for a donation. But I was lucky enough because I was knew the lumber companies and all that, and they were good friends. So when we wanted to do something, I'd go see them, and they donate that. And then
How
we get
wonderful.
volunteers to do it.
Oh,
But now we got this library here. It's 125 feet long and 65 foot wide. The floor is heated, and back here, probably 10, 15 years ago, this area got sold out. Farmers were coming out, getting their land, buying their land for development. So they didn't know what to do with their old machinery and stuff like that. So they knew I was into that. So they donated it, and we took it when we could get it, but now you'd have to do probably Dakota or some western state to pick it up to get the old things.
right. Oh, that is wonderful. Wonderful. Well, like I said, I'm ready for a road trip. I think we need to take a field trip.
Well, if you guys have you here, we can give you a tour here
Yeah.
for.
Well, our old
We'll
jail
wait
part
till
of it is
summer.
B&B now, so you can stay there.
Yeah,
Right.
we can arrange it for you.
Well,
More than
thank you.
welcome, But you have to brave the cold.
Well, that's true. We'll wait till summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't wait too long though, then it's really hot.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. This has been.
Oh,
No, thank you for
absolutely
inviting us.
wonderful.
This was great.
This is great.
And I'm so sorry that Robin missed it live, but she'll be able to watch the recording. And so this is just fabulous. Thank you so, so much. I
I got a
appreciate it.
secret.
Thank you.
I got a secret to tell you. We got George Washington buried up here just about a mile from us.
Oh, you do?
He's actually a slave that fought in the Civil War.
Oh,
He was a
wow.
runaway slave that fought in the Civil War.
Oh, my goodness.
Story about actually, and another one named Nat Jones. And we'd be happy to send you our newsletter if you like. It's some good reading.
Oh, that would be wonderful. That would be
This area was a
wonderful.
real hotbed of abolitionists. So we have an awful lot of runaway slaves that either settled here or the residents at the time helped transport them to Canada.
Yes. Oh, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. Such a rich history you have. Such a rich history. Yeah. So thank you very much. We really enjoyed it. And Robin will be in touch with you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. We learned a lot.
Thank you.
Adios.
Okay. I'll go ahead and leave
We're going
the
to end.
end here. Okay. All right.